Right. Yay. Another getting over the hump with hemp day. That's my favorite saying.
That is pretty cute.
Thanks, ladies, for being here again. This is my favorite thing to do. So today in our Women's Health Healing and Happiness with Hemp, we are talking on the subject of postpartum, the period after having a baby. So not something I have personal experience with, but I do work a lot with clients who come in either for themselves or for their baby right after baby's born or in a few months after. The ones that I see years and years later are wishing that they knew that this therapy was available before. And it just amazes me that it's not. And that's why I'm glad we're here to kind of spread the word on how to support mamas. In France, it's just part of what happens after you have a baby. You get therapy for your vagina because we want those working again. And there's so much that can be done. I always say that I think every mom and baby should be treated immediately after giving birth. Your body goes through a lot. The baby goes through a lot, especially these days, kind of some of the exposure it gets, particularly if it's in the hospital. I can't imagine the shock, and a lot of babies just thinking, oh my God, did I sign up for this? So it's just wonderful to have options and have ways to support. So I'm going to start with introductions again. I feel like I'm on the Brady Bunch. I'm looking down at Dara Ekster. That's amazing. Dara is she's a massage therapist who specializes in Mayan abdominal massage. And she's also an organic farmer and has lots of experience. She's a retired midwife and has her own journey and story, which I love hearing and never gets old to me. So I'm excited for her to share that today. She's out of Taos, New Mexico. And then we have Dr. Eileen Karpfinger, and she is, back in Northern California. And she is a chiropractor and a functional nutritionist. And she specializes in finding any holistic approaches for any condition. And we have Shiela Vanderveer, who is a midwife, and she owns a practice. I want to say this right because there's a lot going on with your practice. It's amazing, but it's a home birth, wellness, and healing practice. Yes, wonderful. And then I'm Reid, and I am an occupational therapist who does not do traditional occupational therapy. I work a lot with body, hands-on, with visceral manual techniques, specializing in pelvic floor health and pelvic floor discomforts. So we all met because we are all involved in a plant-based wellness hemp company. And we are all fortunate to have the experience of using the hemp plant and its wonderfulness with our clients. Now, on that note, I have to do the disclaimer that we are not here to diagnose, treat, cure, or say that anything that we talk about can. So that's crossing our T's and dotting our I's right there. But there is some magnificent wisdom that will come from today. So let's dive into that. I want to mention, so a lot of the research and a lot of the talk that's out there is just about CBD. So when we are talking about our personal experiences and knowledge, we're referring to the hemp plant. That is what we work with. We don't work with just CBD as an isolate. And Dr. Eileen has gotten into it before and perhaps today, but when you isolate a certain molecule, you're taking away the entourage effect. You're taking away the benefits of the full plant. And our hemp extracts are broad spectrum. They're not full spectrum. That would be with THC. So they're broad spectrum. They have terpenes, other cannabinoids, so much goodness besides just CBD, just not THC. So you're going to get a high, but not that kind of high. So all that being said, I want to start with Dara. So when I was doing some research on what we could dive into today about postpartum and about hemp, everything went to postpartum depression. That's all the research, all the talk was about postpartum depression. There was a study in 2004 or 5 that over 17 states and to see how many women had PPD. And it came out to about 15%. And then there was another conservative study that said 1 out of 7. But then they go on to say that they think 85% of women with PPD do not seek treatment. So you can take those numbers, but I'm sure the experience that we all have had is it's a higher number, or at least in part some of the conditions that women with PPD would have. And the three main things and emotions, conditions, I'm trying not to say the word diagnosis, but the three things that usually come with PPD are sadness, anxiety, and exhaustion. And I think those are probably three of the main things that women would experience after having their baby. So Dara, if you want to just dive in to your experience and just some of, the ECS and how it starts and how it helps to nourish mom who just created a life, and now she's got to get back to, taking care of herself so that she can take care of this new creation.
Thank you, Erica, so much for hosting this again and gathering us together. This is such an important conversation, and I'm just going to get started. And I know we can go back and forth, and that Shiela and Eileen are going to be able to pick up with more details on what I start to share. But when we look at the statistics, we've seen different statistics. I haven't looked at them in a while, but when I was practicing as a midwife, in my consciousness, I had about 80% of all women postpartum have postpartum blues, some form of sadness or low in their mood, right? And then with the rest of the 20%, we're looking at, like you just said, around 15% of clinically diagnosed postpartum depression, with anywhere from 1 to 5% of actual clinical postpartum psychosis. So this is serious, right? This is basically saying 100% of women suffer mentally, emotionally postpartum in some way. Is part of that cultural? Absolutely. When I first was training as a midwife, I went down to Guatemala and was working with these midwives outside of Quetzaltenango in their villages. And I was there for this woman coming out of her quarantina. That's what they call the 40-day postpartum. We've all been in quarantine now. This is what traditional cultures do. These women go into a 40-day quarantina where they are in a dark room that's very yin, that's very nurturing. Their aunties and their grandmas and their sisters, all the women of the entire village are taking care of them. They're being nurtured at a very deep level, and the demands on them, other than resting, recuperating, and making breast milk, are virtually nothing. These women are getting their hair brushed, they're getting bathed. This is traditionally the level at which women were taken care of, and we could all cry, because that's what women deserve. That's what women need. That's what babies need to have the proper start. Thank goodness we have home birth midwives out there that are practicing. Thank you, Shiela, because these women are the most blessed in our culture here in America, because they get sometimes, up to weekly visits for the first 6 weeks, for that 40 days, from their home birth midwife. For sure at 1 week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks. And oftentimes the midwives are on the phone regularly, going into the home way more often to help with breastfeeding, to give the mom a break. Privileged women are able to hire a postpartum doula or an Ayurvedic doula to come in so that they can take a shower, so that they can have a nourishing meal prepared for them. Oftentimes, women are coming out of the hospital. The vast majority of women are having their babies in hospital. They're not getting cared for unless there's a problem with their sutures, or when they take their baby in for their baby's first vaccination and child checkup at 2 months. The women are not getting cared for postpartum. We know that 1/3 of all women on average are having cesareans and are coming out with a major abdominal surgery on top of having a brand new baby. And so what women are faced with is truly insurmountable, and the level of exhaustion, the level of sadness that can come in. And we'll start to talk about the hormones. So progesterone is like the happy hormone. It's what makes the skin super radiant in pregnancy. People are like, "Ooh, are you pregnant? You're so pretty." Like, you've got, your hair is thick and rich and shiny, and your nails are strong. And progesterone makes you happy. It makes you feel beautiful. It peaks when we ovulate. So that feeling when women are fertile and feeling yummy and juicy, that is progesterone. When progesterone crashes during our menstrual cycle and estrogen rises, then we're about about to bleed. So if we think of like PMS as like a microcosm, like of what can happen postpartum, of just feeling really yucky and moody and emotional and sad and exhausted and really low, that is kind of what happens. So on day 3 postpartum, the progesterone crashes, the milk comes in, and as midwives, we talk to them about it. Like, this, your 3rd day is going to be hard. You might cry all day, and that's totally normal, and it's totally okay. And that's where the baby blues can start. And then depending on how traumatic the birth was, how high the level of exhaustion is, it can really skyrocket there, especially when the significant other has to go right back to work. I mean, it's just crazy. And so I can share, there's so much more to talk about, and I want to leave things for Shiela and Eileen to talk about through all of this, because it's so important. But my experience was that I started taking our hemp extracts when my son was 2.5 years old. He was still breastfeeding. I knew that I had been struggling, but when I started to take the hemp and I started getting my joy back and getting my energy back, I was like, was I just clinically depressed and had never been diagnosed? Like, I didn't even realize it. I think we get into this, like, we're a mom, we have to deal. It's just supposed to be hard kind of automated mode where so many women, I'm one of them, I didn't seek clinical help because I didn't even realize what was happening. It had become my new normal, which should never be a woman or a mother or anyone's new normal or normal in any way. So for me, taking the hemp extracts absolutely regulated my hormones, absolutely supported my nervous system, completely transformed my life overnight, stabilized my blood sugar. I've talked about that in some of our other ones. So, my life absolutely turned around. But when I think back to where I was, it's a place I would never want to go to. And I feel so grateful that we have these to be able to support women postpartum so that they don't have to go there either, because way too many new moms and even moms after a year or two are still really, really suffering for all of the reasons that I just talked about and so much more. So there's a download to get us started with, and we can go from there.
I mean, the Quarantino, is that what it's called?
Quarantina. In Latin America, it's Quarantina, yeah, but which means 40.
Well,
yeah.
and you think about it, I mean, some of us have talked about, it's what we're doing right now. We're using this time to create the new version of us, the new version of what this world's going to be like, the new version of, a lot of us are looking at new careers, new businesses, new everything, just because of everything that's going on and the changes. And, if we're just sitting in our home and you're stressed and trying to just not be supported, but that's not going to go very well versus taking this time right now to get out in the sunshine in our backyards, to take time to meditate, to take time to think about, okay, how am I going to adapt? What is this push? What is this growth I'm supposed to get out of this? There's a study, and I wish I could remember exactly what the numbers are right now, but basically they looked at what most moms do. They try to jump right back into work, and they try to jump back right into doing things. And they did a study, if you actually take, I think it was a month or two to really nurture, it was probably the 40 days, but to really nurture yourself and take care of yourself, that you actually rebound, you come back to you right away versus it, otherwise, I think it was 2 years before moms find that they feel themselves again. So pretty significant findings there, how important it's just in our culture, at least, we are just like, you got to prove that you can just jump right back and go back to work or go back to doing and do it all. This is what, I feel like we're constantly trying to prove, and it just would really behoove us to take that time to nurture ourselves. So, as soon as you have the baby, your hormones completely shift. And Eileen and I were talking earlier, and I love the way that she said it. You're going from creating to nurturing, and your everything, your chemicals, your hormones, everything, we're going towards making this baby and making sure that your body was able to do this. And now it's like, okay, let's take care of you, and let's get you back so that you can take care of this baby and feed this baby. So nurture yourself and the baby or babies. So there's this huge hormone shift that happens. There's this huge shift in chemicals. So Eileen, can you dive into what that looks like? I think
Yeah.
we all know what it feels like, but what it looks like for the body.
Sure. Dara, you did such a great job of pointing out the tragedy of Western birthing and how beautiful it is that the Guatemalans are nurturing. And let's just talk, because there's no need to go any further into that, but let's go into the science behind what's happening in the nervous system and the hormonal systems, which are the things that are shifting. If you can picture like the moon going from waxing to waning, or the ocean going tides in and tide out, you've got a shift happening here when the mother's just birthed and now she's got to put her body back together. She's no longer building a human in her body, a spiritual being in her body. She's actually just nurturing and feeding that baby, right? Is fully sustaining that baby, but no longer having to build that tissue for them directly. They're doing it themselves with her breast milk, right? And their vitality. So we're looking at the strategy shift in the fourth trimester is what I call it. The third trimester, you have the baby. The fourth trimester, I go as much as 90 days in, and I talk about the big shift, because for me personally, I could tell you that the day, I wasn't watching this, but the day the fourth trimester ended, I was like, let's go out for pizza. You know, it's like I could get back out in the world instead of just be inward, inward, inward. And so that fourth trimester, the first 3 months after, I think that's kind of what you're speaking of, Dara, of the kind of the nurturing time for women, that they just need to go inward. And what's happening neurologically, there's some good studies about this. They call it mommy brain, right? Mommy brain is that brain that's like, what was that I was supposed to be thinking about when prior to that you were the CEO of Microsoft or whatever it is, and now all of a sudden you can't even figure out that you want to put your shoes on to go out the door, right? That happens. That's a neurological thing, and it's a good thing. What's happening is that we have a neurological shift to where we're patterning based on oxytocin. We're patterning differently in our brains to create the nurturing effect for our kids. Our bodies do this to us to not go back to work, to make sure that we are focusing on this life that we've just created. So we have different gray matter lighting up in our brains just from the process of having given birth and nursing. So the oxytocin, the hormones are helping the nervous system, and the nervous system itself is really affected by the shift happening. Okay, so this is actual neurological and hormonal. And what's interesting is that the endocannabinoid system, the system that we talk about with hemp, it nurtures all the other systems of the body, but it especially nurtures the nervous system, the endocrine system, our gut, and our immune system, right? So all of those things are going to be supported with taking a supplement of hemp to nurture. So if you're noticing that there's going to be an effect, if your brain, if you're exhausted, you have anxiety, you have sadness. For me, there was overwhelm, just this kind of like starstruckness that I didn't have this hemp supplement. And I feel like when I was able to really add this mother of my own system to help me deal with everything that I'm dealing with, which is sustaining a whole nother life form, as well as nourishing my own body, it was such a godsend to have that. So talking a little bit about oxytocin, the oxytocin in the body, and what the body's doing when it's secreted. So the oxytocin is secreted by the posterior lobe of our pituitary gland, which is in the hindbrain area, like right in the base of our brain area. And it acts on organs in the body, including the breast and the uterus. And it's a chemical messenger in the body, controlling key aspects of the reproductive system, including childbirth and lactation, right? And it's also known as the cuddle hormone. Dara was talking about progesterone being the happy hormone. Oxytocin is the cuddle hormone. It makes us feel lovey to our lovers. It makes us feel lovey to our children. You've seen those cats that take in any kind of animal and start nursing it. That's oxytocin in their body saying, you come here, I will take care of you, and I will cuddle you. And new science is showing that there's oxytocin dependent endocannabinoid signaling. So there's signaling that can only happen in the endocannabinoid system when oxytocin is flowing in our bodies. So again, we've got this system in our body called the endocannabinoid system, and this system mothers the other systems of our body. And what we're seeing is that in a pregnant and lactating woman, we have extra, it's like we have superhuman endocannabinoid activity. We have the ability for our endocannabinoid system to work even better for us because of the oxytocin signaling of it. And what that's doing is it's creating a social, rewarding social behavior. There's some good stuff we can talk about some other day about autistic children, and that they might not have had as much oxytocin in their systems to trigger that side of social behavior. But it also affects our own bodies as mothers, lactating mothers, and pregnant mothers, to be loving to our family. Did I do that well? Are we done?
Did that amazing. We could go all day. So it's so fascinating. And, you know, I've said it before, but I just love oxytocin. I know Lily calls our hemp extract peace in a bottle, and I refer to as love in a bottle. So it's my form of oxytocin, I suppose, in a bottle. I want to mention too, that so what I see a lot of is mothers who've come and their birth story was not what they wanted, and which has traumatized them, and which also, you know, and or they were traumatized in the hospital setting by doctors that just, you know, possibly did not heed their request, and just the way some things were done. And so thank goodness that there is home birth still out there. Thank you, Shiela. So I see a lot of women who basically have PTSD from their birth. And obviously this is going to stunt their healing, because they're still in a state of fight or flight. We talked last time about the psoas, and the baby follows the psoas muscle down the body. And this is our fight, flight, or freeze response muscle. But it can also be our rest and digest muscle. You know, it sits right there. It's connected to the gut. So whatever's going on with our gut is going on with that, and they trigger each other back and forth. So we all know, or we've all talked about and discussed that hemp extract, and the effects of it is to bring us into our parasympathetic body, into our rest and digest, or as I said last time, tend and befriend body, which I think is super, super important, because we cannot heal in that fight or flight stage, right? So women, they have just given so much, and here they're still trying to give to themselves and to this little creature. But if they're in this state of what just happened, you know, and they're not given the time to process that, that's huge. That's going to be a huge setback for them. So for me, I've found that it's super important to, you know, use my tools with my hands and the body work and talking them through it, but then offering something that can help them get into that state so much easier. And the other thing that I work with a lot is C-section. Again, many times that is part of that's not my birth story, but this is what happened. And sometimes it's elected as well. So I always tell moms, please, when the doctor gives you okay, let's start working on this, because I have found in women years later after C-section, they usually have scar tissue connected to either their bladder or their back, causing issues, or both. Mm-hmm. So the scar tissue vines out, even if the doctors are often happy they did just a nice little scar and they're very proud of it, and that's great. But what's happening underneath is not the story's not being told. And fascia does bind, and scar tissue does vine out and reach out. And I've had that experience, not after having a child, but having a scar from a ruptured appendix. And, I think I mentioned it last time, that was my years of painful sex, because the scar tissue wrapped around my tailbone and everything. So the same thing can happen. This is what I find in women, and this is where we work and release that. And we've also mentioned that when body work and tissue work is done, we release the nitric oxide and we release cannabinoids in our body and create that experience of healing. I'm just going to call it that. Just we create that experience of healing. So how great to have the plant to come in to help us, since most of us are deficient, as you talked about last time, Dara. Most of us are deficient in our ECS, in our endocannabinoid system. So getting that external plant medicine to come in and help us, I think, is super, super important. So that being said, Shiela, you, again, you're right there. This is your hands-on as well. You're experiencing all of this. You're providing these nurturing home births. Thank you. And so share with us some of your experiences and what you see and feel. And
yeah. Well, I just want to start with saying how happy I am to be here, because I just love all of your passion around all three of you, and just our blend. I feel that the postpartum is such an undercared for time, and it's become more and more of my passion as a midwife. And everything you've all talked about is so essential. And even with a home birth that, with me is very much focused on obviously having the birth be as undisturbed as possible, but also for how to prepare for the postpartum in a very proactive way. And it is very difficult for people in this culture, even with a supportive midwife and even with, resources to do so. And I believe that that is very much based in a deep physiological misunderstanding of what's happening, which Dara, you spoke to, and you all have spoken to. The fourth trimester is really the forgotten trimester, because the other three, are, because the baby's on the inside and you're having all these experiences of growing the baby, and just the nature of it, right? It's compelling beyond words. And then the fourth trimester, because it's really rooted in, it's an extension of the pregnancy, as you've all spoken to, in terms of the brain changes, the fact that the baby they do not see or experience themselves as separate from their parent, their birthing parent. And so the physiological piece on that is such an undercared for, and because, as you said, right, so many people, the majority of people, are still birthing in the hospital. But at home, there's the added layer. I go see my clients 3 times in the first week, and I am very much a part of nurturing them on all the levels, helping them make sure they get their sitz baths and they get their herbs and they are getting fed properly and they aren't getting up and getting themselves anything if we can help it. But that's our modern day culture is so pervasive, right? That there's so much guilt for women and birthing people to work through. It's really profound. And then there's also, because of the physiological misunderstanding, and it's pigeonholed into postpartum depression so often. But like you said, Dara, almost everyone experiences blues. And depending on what their original story, right, their own life trajectory, their own experience with trauma, their own experience with love or lack thereof, or their own birth, whatever, right, it's all the things. You're going to be working through that at that time, no matter how proactive you are in your pregnancy and whatnot. And so, and so many women and birthing people feel like it's privilege. And what we need to shift around that conversation, right, is that it's not a privilege. It's absolutely a physiological necessity to be nurtured in that time. And so that's where I see hemp oil coming in and being really helpful, because of that dissonance that is actually a very lived experience in birthing people's bodies and brains, is that there becomes hypervigilance and other anxieties and sadnesses, even in a healthy mom and a healthy birth scenario and a well-supported family, which is not the norm, right? And so I love this, especially last time we talked about the birth experience. And just because we're in such an open space, and that, you know, homeopathics, hemp oil, herbs, they all really just go to where they need to. And the postpartum is the same, you know, the early postpartum. And so the hemp oil really helps with not just the levitating of the mood, because that is meant to shift, right? And it's about helping us to do that, which Eileen, you spoke to really beautifully about that, and the way that the brain changes, and helping to, what I like to call, entrain with the baby, right? Because the baby's in a theta state primarily. And so we call it the baby movie, you know, where everyone's just like chilling, you know, but that can create dissonance in the mother. And I've had a lot of moms with beautiful birth experiences, very healthy, but they are awake for 5 days after they've given birth to their baby because of the host of hormonal pieces you all spoke to. But I also believe because of the societal dissonance that we have all inherited and have to move through on a cellular level, and the postpartum is the most vulnerable time for that, that it can create hypervigilance, which can then create a lack of sleep, greater anxiety, all of that. And so hemp oil really, really comes in so beautifully. And I do find that also the adrenaline that naturally happens, right, when you have had a good birth experience and you are feeling healthy and your vagina actually feels good, because some people's vaginas feel fine after birth when they do birth. I mean, of course, they're always sore and need nurturing, but like their health is there, you know, that they want to get up and they want to putter and they want to do all these things, but then there's a cost for that, right? And so the hemp oil helps this regulation piece where they can stay in bed and they can entrain with their babies, and they can be with how much work it is to breastfeed. That's a full-time job, you know, and how much more shifting and integration needs to happen. So that's where I find it really helpful, let alone how, you know, it moves through the breast milk and really nurtures the baby's ECS. Endocannabinoid system, which is awesome to see, you know, like I can't, you know, as you said, we can't, this is my experience around babies are calmer. There is less colic and gas and colic is overdiagnosed, but gas and the natural digestive system stuff that babies have. And I believe it's because it's that entrainment piece. And then obviously getting as much of the village, how we create village around nurturing the new mother and parent. So I recommend it all the time. And I'm really pleased at how it's growing, and that we can see it as important as nettles for our adrenals, right? Because that's partly what's at play, right? That the adrenal system is overtaxed, which steals from our other systems in order to negotiate. And I fully agree, and I can end here with what you were saying around, Erica, around the importance of I call it paying it forward, but the more that we can nurture and rest in that 40-day period and beyond. I think of the fourth trimester, like the first 40 days are like, you're just returning. You're returning from the initiation of birth, right? And then the second half of that fourth trimester is where you start to reintegrate into whatever your life is and your community is. So as a whole, it's really important, and the hemp oil helps with that titration, which is also very underestimated. Misunderstood. And the more we can understand the physiology and support it with such amazing plant medicine as hemp oil, that is societal change at the heart of it, you know, so.
Wonderful. So I'm so glad you touched on the babies, because that's where I was going to go next.
Oh, good.
That whole thing about entraining with the baby, that's profound. That's beautiful. So beautiful.
Well, that's part of where the dissonance comes in, right? Is like, because we're expecting ourselves to be somewhere else. And if we actually entrain there where our physiology is actually very much aligned with, there's less dissonance in the system on all levels. So sorry to interrupt.
No interruption. I mean, that's the main thing. I mean, it used to be that as soon as you had your baby was on your chest, and you started that relationship a long time before that. And I remember Time magazine coming out with an article that showed that they were able to prove that baby was already picking up on things from mom. Obviously, it's because it's within mom, but from the partner as well. And it's always been interesting for me to have people come in and say, yeah, my knee's a bum knee because, my mom's knee was bum and my grandma's knee was bum. So it's in my DNA. But with the work with Bruce Lipton and epigenetics, it's not really necessarily the DNA. It's the energetic, and Dr. Eileen can explain it better than me, but they're picking up on how you carry yourself, how you react to things. I mean, the whole gamut of our physical, our emotional, and our spiritual aspects of each one of us. And that's where baby's getting these things from. And I don't know how many babies have come in, and I've worked on them as a baby, as a newborn, anywhere up to 6 months, and they're already experiencing something that the parent is like, oh, I've always had shoulder issues, or I've always had, this or that. And so it's amazing, that connection that is getting missed so often. And then of course the gut issues are one of the biggest things I see right away already. Baby having gut issues from what mom's taking. And so mom has to change her diet. Often it's dairy and things like that are controlling what's happening, how the baby is feeling, because there's that direct connection through the milk. Even if they're not breastfeeding, there was already that connection from mom's body was the one that was feeding baby. So on that note, Dr. Eileen, I'd love for you to jump into exactly what happens. Is it safe to take it while you're breastfeeding, and what's happening with that connection there?
So yeah, I think we can all answer this. Our breast milk has lots of things in it, including lots of probiotics that are very essential for the gut. And probiotics marry well with endocannabinoids that are in our gut as well. And there's a lot of endocannabinoid receptors in our gut. Guess what? There's a ton of endocannabinoids that our body makes. We make 2 endocannabinoids. Endo means within the body. We make 2 of them, arachidonyl glycerol and anandamide. And both of those are in breast milk, but 2-AG or 2-arachidonyl glycerol is in there more. And its job is the gut. Its job is mostly dealing with the heart brain, the gut brain, the enteric nervous system, if you will, and being married within that. And so our bodies are hardwired to provide endocannabinoids to our babies from the moment we start making colostrum. And what's interesting is that if that's natural, and what hemp does or any phytocannabinoid does is nourish and detox that system, how can it not be helpful for that baby?
Mm-hmm. So what happens if you're, we talked before and we said most people are deficient. There is an actual diagnosis of being deficient in your ECS. So what happens when your body, Dara, if you want to touch on this one, or what happens when your body is deficient and you're not getting this supplement? Because most people are deficient because of our environments and our toxins. So we can pretty much assume that somebody's going to be, and then they're putting this load of developing and caring for a baby on their body.
Right.
Sorry about that. I muted myself. So I want to just start with a disclaimer that we don't claim that hemp in any way is going to heal, treat, cure, prevent any illness or disease. It's just a dietary supplement. It's not a medication. It's all about supporting the body to function optimally. So I just want to say that. I also want to say that you're never, ever going to see any clinical studies on pregnancy and breastfeeding with supplements or really medications. Maybe there's some on medications because some moms need to take things like antidepressants and anti-anxiety. So there are the different classifications of meds of what's safe, not. But with supplements, you won't see it. Like no one's going to go do clinical studies because it could harm a baby. And so they're not going to do it. So we need to give you the information, and then it's informed consent. You need to go do your research and decide if it's something that you feel safe with. For me, I wish I'd had it during pregnancy. I had a very stressful pregnancy for various reasons that I'm not going to go into. And I had a very stressful postpartum. So if I had not been stressed out so much, my baby, optimally, if my ECS was functioning, which it hasn't been for many years, my baby would have been swimming in an ocean of cannabinoids. My breast milk would have been filled with cannabinoids. Instead, unfortunately, my baby was often swimming in my overwhelm, in my stress, in my cortisol. The babies swim in our emotions. They swim in our stress hormones. They literally get all of it. And I don't say that to put pressure on us moms, because we live in a stressful time. I think about the pregnant moms right now in a global pandemic that are pregnant or postpartum and what they're dealing with on top of what women are already dealing with. It's a very stressful time. And the babies get it from us. And so it's not like, how do we eliminate any stress? Because that's not really realistic. We're going to come up with stress. It's how, I think about it's how do we mitigate the stressors, right? It's what can we do to help lower the stress in the mom and help protect the baby from getting overloaded with stress hormones. And so, or sadness or overwhelm in the postpartum hormones going into the breast milk. And I saw, my baby's nervous system integrate the stress that I had. And it's something that I wish wasn't happening. And I saw my nervous system shift, and I saw his nervous system shift when we were breastfeeding. Once I started taking the hemp extract, the whole relationship changed in his body and in my body. It wasn't just me. So for the moms to be able to have this, and to take and be able to give through their breast milk, if they're breastfeeding, I know not everyone has the privilege or the ability to be able to breastfeed for various reasons, but for the breastfeeding moms, especially, for them to be able to give this to the baby at that time, I think is such an absolute gift. And for people that are comfortable taking it in pregnancy, you're also going to be getting it to the baby in utero and giving them the blessing of being able to have a buffer, to have their ECS functioning so that they can handle and mitigate any stress hormones that are coming into them because they're upregulated too. So I just think that's so huge.
Yeah. Thank you. I think I've covered everything. Maybe the immune system, Dr. Eileen, we had mentioned your immune system is possibly depleted when you're exhausted. I know the only time that I have started to get sick, I haven't gotten sick in 10 years, knock on wood. But the only time that I've noticed I've started to get sick is when I'm not sleeping, for whatever reason, purposely or just, there's things going on. And so I can't imagine for a new mom, this lack of sleep. I've seen some of my friends on Facebook talk about there's a mom challenge going on right now, and they'll miss a few days and they're like, sorry guys, it's, this is real. This is how it is. And, once I catch up with some sleep, I'll get back to you. So I think that's a huge risk, is not only are we trying to, get ourselves back to normal, but we're trying not to get so depleted that we actually bring our immune system down and get sick. So I imagine the nature of hemp and hemp extract and its immune boosting benefits would be another aspect of why this is so important for the postpartum mom.
Yeah, when you talk about just this pandemic that we're dealing with right now and the stress, the emotional stress, anytime we have physical, chemical, or emotional stress, we are affecting our immune system, we're affecting our nervous system. We have the ability to go into autoimmune issues. So any issue that we're dealing with that is fighting the body, Hashimoto's, cancers, any of these things that our body could be dealing with, insulin issues, things like that, we're going to be it's because of the difference of the chemical, emotional, or chemical, emotional, or physical stresses. As a practitioner, I've seen it over the years that somebody's going along just fine. They get into a car accident, they're recovering from the car accident, all of a sudden they've got Lyme. And the Lyme was there before, it was dormant, but now it's higher because it's shown itself because of the stress, the physical stress on the body. Or maybe they're doing just fine physically, but they go through a divorce and all of a sudden they've got eczema, right? All of these things are showing up because of the stresses in the body going over threshold because of another stressor not being handled. The beautiful thing about nourishing and taking care of your endocannabinoid system is its job is to support all of the other systems. And so just like any other person, any other animal, if your endocannabinoid system is nourished, you're going to have less chance of getting over threshold because that's going to go do some extra work for you. If your mom was with you in postpartum, and guess how many dishes might she be doing? How much laundry might she be doing? Is she taking care of the kids? This is what the endocannabinoid system is doing in the body. It's going to take care of all the other things that you need to address so that you might be able to sustain through things like a pandemic and stuff like that, to not be stressed physically, chemically, or emotionally. So the germ theory would say if there's a germ in the room, you're going to get it, right? Cell theory says if your system can handle the stressors of life, you're going to, it doesn't matter if there's a germ in the room or not, it's your system that's going to determine if you get it or not. Mm-hmm. And the way we deal with the immune health and the way we can make sure our immune health is strong is to make sure we're getting proper nutrients, including phytocannabinoids being a nutrient, proper sleep, which is tough while we're in postpartum. But if you're using a family bed and just rolling over to nurse and basically staying in this little state of theta with your baby and coming, you can sleep some, get some support there. So nourishment, sleep, and it's about it that you need while you're in postpartum. Those are the things you should just be sleeping and eating and taking care of your baby, right? But you have to be able to get rid of waste well too. But the beauty of supplementing with a nourishing hemp during postpartum is to support all of the other systems, and with that, the immune system's part of that.
Love it. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Looks like we're close to, I've been checking Facebook as always, just to see no specific questions yet. I think we covered a lot of good, yummy ground. Anything else anybody wants to add last minute before we wrap it up?
I'm curious if Shiela has, seen any like acute situations where you've recommended hemp extracts to postpartum moms and you've seen something shift or turnaround for them, obviously without making any medical claims, but I'm just curious if you have, and it's okay if you don't have any specific stories, but I'm curious if you do.
Yeah, no, the one that comes to mind is I had two different clients who both had that hypervigilance piece that I was talking about, and literally, and these are healthy people that although one retrospectively, actually, there was some thyroid stuff that we identified later on. So regardless, the point is that it's multi-layered, right? And they just literally were not sleeping. So I agree, if you can, in line with the broken up sleep with a baby, without doing any extras, but just being in that zone, it's usually pretty manageable. But if you don't even get that, then it starts to create a whole other thing. And so there was this one mom, she literally didn't sleep for the first 5 days of her babe's life. And I was seeing her and we were doing all, like infusions of motherwort and chamomile and like truly like doing our best in that way. And the hemp, we finally got that on board, and it really like just brought that down. and again, the sleep was broken up still, but the digestive distress as well as that hypervigilance was definitely calmed. And, you know, I also feel like in terms of what Eileen was just saying, and like the immune piece, right? Which I totally agree with what you were saying about our cellular health. It's like now even more important because we're getting so much fear around, you know, this virus being able to just get us at any point, you know, and the pregnant people and new parents are very vulnerable to that period, like let alone right now. But just the nurturing of our nervous system and how that impacts our health, and just how that as a midwife who is with these scenarios day in and day out, like that is just, we have got to work on that piece as a culture, obviously, but then all of us. And I do really see hemp's benefit in that regard, because that's a lifelong process, right? Dealing with trauma and all the ways that our concept of normal has been completely distorted in our culture, and particularly with birthing people and with new parents and babies. Like, babies are so smart. They are brilliant to tell us exactly what they need if we can listen, but we don't listen any longer. And I think of hemp as helping us in that innate ability to listen more deeply, because we're calmer and we're more available for that. And so that's why I really care about it, and really, you know, introduce it to people. And like you said, everybody does their own research and they make their own decisions, and informed consent is my jam. And in experience, you know, it definitely is a game changer in that piece, and helping people to really just be in that entrainment, which nothing in our larger society supports. So, yeah. Yeah.
I'm with you on the sleep.
Yeah.
Everybody knows me, knows if I don't get much sleep, then you might want to walk the other way. I have hemp extract, so so we're good. So we're good. But and informed consent, you know. Again, people who know me know some of the projects I'm involved in right now, and it's around informed consent. And that's why it's so important for me to get this information out, because it's not out there. And, you know, like you said, it's so ingrained in our society that this is just how it goes. I mean, I don't know how many women tell me, well, I had a baby, so of course my bladder's going to leak, you know. And I mean, that's a whole nother, we can do postpartum way down the road, because no, that doesn't have to be the reason why. But it's just common. Oh, well, you had kids. Well, of course that's going to happen. And I worked, my favorite example of that is an 85-year-old woman who came in after years of leaking, after she had kids. And finally, it just got so bad that she was standing at the bank once and just peed a puddle at the bank. And she's like, well, what was I going to do? I walked up to the teller, did my thing, and I left. And when I left, I saw they had put a little, what are those things called, that, you know, caution. And she just happened to mention it to her doctor. Something came up because that situation was so horrifying for her. Otherwise, she just never mentioned it to her doctor, because what's he going to do about it? You know, this is just how it's been. And he happened to know, you know, he has referred people to me before, and he referred her to me, and literally 2 sessions, she was 90% better, never even had to go down there. It was, you know, it was scar tissue in her back, and an injury that she had had. And it all reinforced itself together, you know. And so we were able to release that and release her body, and she didn't have to have those years of suffering. So it's so vital to get this out. It's you know, obviously my passion. That's why we're doing this. And anyone that's watching this that hasn't seen the prior 3 that we did now, the first one was just in general on women and hemp oil for their health, healing, and happiness. And then we did fertility, and we did the perinatal during pregnancy, and now the postnatal. And I look forward to doing many, many more. Thank you, every one of you, for sharing once again your wisdom and your passion and your experiences. I learned something every time. I enjoy it so much. I encourage anyone who's listening to this, to whoever shared this this video with you. If it's after the fact or this live, please reach out to them if you're interested in getting hemp extract for you, whether you're postpartum or not. So important. Go back and watch some of the other videos on why it's so important for your body, because I really just, you know, us women, we could need that extra support, and this in turn helps the men. So, you know, we're all in this together. But we do offer different hemp extracts within our company. We have a great one coming out for immunity. We have one for focus, one for calm. We have one come out called core. So get with a person and see what might be the best for you. Might be all three, might be a specific one, but get this natural plant medicine in your body, not just because, oh, this is just another supplement. There's 20 out there that I'm told I need. This is something we produce in our body, but we're all so deficient because of the toxins, because of the environment, because of the world, especially now with the rampant fear that's, you know, being pushed on us. We need to support our body to produce its own. And that's what the hemp extract is doing. It's not going in onto the receptors and saying, here, you know, plugging in. It's creating an environment so that our body can do its job of getting us into a rest and digest, a healing state. So it's as simple as that. So yay, thank you. And I certainly look forward to our next one.
You know, thank you, Erica. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much.